Hello, welcome to Blog Talk Radio, and you are listening to Truth to Power, and my name is Beverly, and tonight we have a special guest, and the special guest is Neely Fuller, Jr., and he has written a book, The United Independent Compensatory Code, System, and Concept. Mr. Fuller, is this you on the line?
No, this is Brother.
Okay, hold on. I got the wrong one. Hold on. Hello, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I was just telling the audience that you have written a book, and this book is called The United Independent Compensatory Code, Systems, and Concepts. And for short, it's called the Code Book.
Yes.
And we're going to get into it. Thanks for coming on the show tonight. And what inspired you to write this book, or why did you write it? Or
I wrote it because I was thinking about problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire world is burdened with problems. Each individual on the planet has some type of problem. And back in the 1950s, I came to the conclusion, after some quiet and serious thought, that the biggest problem of all problems that was in the way of the solution to most of the major problems on the planet was the problem of racism, in the form of what I determined to be, based on evidence, the system of white supremacy, which I said was synonymous with the term racism. May not have been that way all the time, but racism in the form of white supremacy, which I think grew out of the basic format of royalism, meaning some people taking the position that they are holier than thou and therefore have a blank check for misusing other people. And they based that on color, which was something unique for it to be done on a wide scale. But I came to this conclusion while I was overseas, and I had a lot of time to think. I was sort of in an isolated situation in an Air Force uniform and on a radar site. It was what you call a hardship post in Japan, meaning you get limited time to stay there because you're kind of isolated. And I was thinking that might be why a lot of people write books or do a lot of serious thinking sometimes when they're in prison, because that's the first time they have had some quiet time, or a lot of time open-ended to think. So I was thinking seriously about what was the major problem in the world at that time, and it seemed to be, based on the evidence that I could see, was racism. You couldn't solve any other major problem without first dealing with racism. And if you tried it, you were going to run into the obstacle of racism. You could start out in any problem in economics, which people have discussed for years, back and forth, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war. You couldn't solve any of these problems on a world scale without at some point running into the race problem, and that's where everything came to a dead halt. You couldn't get any further than that. And in thinking about that and then looking around for the evidence that this was true, I didn't have to look very long. Or rather, the evidence came to me rather than me searching for it. Everywhere I would go, everybody I talked to, everything that I heard on the radio or saw on television just proved the conclusion that I tentatively come to. And I still say that even today. Whether if you're in politics, somebody starts out saying that they want to do something that's really serious in politics about solving the problems of people throughout the world in the political arena, the first thing they're going to run into, if it really gets serious, if it really gets to be the real rough and tumble, the real stumbling block that's going to stump everybody is that, wait a minute, what are we going to do about this problem of color? What color people are. That becomes the priority over everything else. Now, that was in 1957 when I was thinking like this. So I started making notes, and the notes culminated in the book that you described, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, which is a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, because I was thinking about problem solving. So I said, well, I'm going to take the approach of trying to actually solve the race problem by coming up with formulas that would do so. Now, apparently, I have not achieved that in all these years when I first thought of the idea in 1957. Mm-hmm. But I think that a codified process, meaning the yin and yang, cause and effect, a scientific approach, what makes people do what they do whenever they do it, is the approach to take. And when people do whatever they do, what will be the result? And the result will either be constructive or non-constructive. I came to this conclusion. And I think most people who look at scientific, political mathematics, they will come to the same conclusion. If you're trying to solve a problem among people, you have to first of all divide it into two categories when you approach it. Now, you're either going to get a constructive result or a non-constructive result. That's true in math, that's true in science, that's true in interactions between people. Either it's going to be constructive or non-constructive, regardless of what area of activity it's in.
Now, Mr. Fuller, we have a person in the chat room, and this person is asking a question.
Yes.
And they're saying that on page 64 of your book, you stated that we should buy land. And if we can, with racial dislocation, what's the most effective way to buy land given racial dislocation is inevitable?
Oh, you just buy land. See, all of these all of the entries in the code book, the counter-racist code book, are suggestions, and they are conditional. It depends on what the conditions are of the people who is reading, of the person who is reading the book at the time and place that he or she is reading the book, and then what it is the person is trying to do at that time and place. Now, that wouldn't apply to everybody in all places at all times. Some places you wouldn't want to buy any land because you can look around you and see that this land isn't of any value whatsoever, or it won't be for any time soon for what my needs are. See, it always comes down to the individual. That's why it's called a united independent. You're united theoretically in what you're supposed to be doing, and that's trying to produce a product called justice and peace ultimately. But you, as an individual, you have to function every day. So that suggestion about buying land is just a suggestion to put that idea in a person's mind that, well, if you're going to buy something, if you are able to do so, buy some land that you can use for a, like I said before, constructive purpose. Now, if you don't see where you can use this land for a constructive purpose at the time and place that you selected to buy it, or if you don't see any future use for it and you can hold it that long, then you simply don't do it. See, it's all conditional because the conditions change, because we're still under the system of racism, and the racists, like you mentioned before, this dislocation, the racists may decide, well, what I'll do is I'll open some dams up the river. And when that person buys this land, I'm going to let the water out of this dam, and it's going to flood that person's land 300 miles downstream. The person doesn't know this, but that's what I'm going to do as soon as they buy it. And it's going to be worthless because they're not going to be able to do anything with it but go boating. They bought it for the purpose of growing crops, but all they're going to do is be able to look at it and admire water or go boating on the water, because I'm not going to allow any fishing in that area. That's what you mean by being supreme. You can make these decisions that can jerk people around ad infinitum.
And there's some other things in the book that you were talking about, the maximum sophisticated confusion. What is that?
Maximum sophisticated confusion? What page is that on?
I don't have the page.
You don't have the page
talking
number?
About,
maximum
you were talking about population tailoring and dislocation and sexual.
Oh, now those entries are not in the book. I have discussed those.
Okay.
Right.
Can you kind of
on dislocation? Well, dislocation. If you're going to dominate people over a long period of time and do it in a scientific manner, one of the easiest ways to do it, if not the easiest way, is to keep the people confused. Example, if there are 10 people in a room and only one person knows where the fire exit is, or where the cafeteria is, or where the meeting is going to be held in the building, and that person is directing the other 9 people. Now, the person who knows where the cafeteria is, the fire exit, or whatever, is telling other people where to go. That person is in the best position to cause confusion. If the meeting to be held is on the 5th floor of that building, and the person directs everybody to go to the basement, to the assembly room, and everybody gets on the elevator, the other 9 people that is, they get on the elevator and go to the basement, and they wait around, and they wait around, and then they begin to ask questions. Well, we're at the place where they sent us. Now, where's the meeting? Now, the meeting is actually on the 5th floor. It's not in the basement. But the person who sent them to the basement was in position to cause that confusion. Now you have confusion. And then you have someone of the 9 people who will say, well, maybe you got it wrong. Maybe you thought that they said the basement. Now you got an argument between the people who went to the basement. The white supremacists perfected how to do that with people all over the world, how to cause confusion anytime they come around with the intention of mistreating people based on color. Now, I'm not saying all white people. I'm just saying those who are dedicated to supporting the system of racism. It's a science. It's an exact science. Part of that science is to cause confusion. So you keep confusion going. Dislocation is one of the major ones now. Keep people moving, because they have found out over a period of time that people who are constantly forced to move from one place to another, either the water is rising and they have to move, or in some cases the water is not rising, but the prices are rising in the area where they are, and they can no longer stay there because they can't afford to be where they are. So they raise the prices on everything. They foreclose on the house that a person is in. That person has got to move, because they have found that when people are constantly moving, they are dislocated, and they are angry, and they are frustrated, and they can't get their bearings. They can be almost driven insane by having